Yeah, buddy, it's Friday. That means it's time for the mailbag edition of the Morning Pit. It's always my favorite day of the week. Hopefully it's yours as well. I mean, hopefully you like every day of the Morning Pit. Hopefully your saddest days are on Saturday and Sunday because you get no Morning Pit to dive into and start your day here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. You can just rewatch ones that you missed. Or we had a lot of videos actually yesterday. We had the Morning Pit. We had... I was on the ACC network on Wednesday, so we put that video up on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We had our Wednesday night live show that we put up the videos there on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So, I mean, there was a lot of stuff to look at video-wise yesterday on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Hopefully you saw it all. And if you missed any of it, you can watch that over the weekend and get yourself through the weekend. But today is the mailbag edition of the Morning Pit, where we take questions from all the Pitt fans at Panther-Lair.com, the website below, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com, the place to get all of your Pitt sports news, football, basketball, and recruiting, and to ask questions for the mailbag. Every week on the Between Fifth and Forbes premium message board, we take questions from Pitt fans about all topics, football, basketball, recruiting, whatever it may be. And you can ask those questions. We answer as many as we can right here in the mailbag. We got a lot of great questions this week, as we always do. So let's dive into it. The Morning Pit Mailbag right here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. All right, it is a Friday, and we are here with the Morning Pit Mailbag, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I already told you about the website, so I don't need to repeat that, but I will ask you, as always, to like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That's a place we would appreciate if you would click those buttons. You can click the like button down below. It's a little thumbs up. You can click the subscribe button. It's right there over the yellow.com. There's a little blue box that says subscribe. Click that thing, and that'll make us feel much better. We've seen the subscriber numbers go up this month since training camp started. Maybe you're excited because there's stuff to talk about with football. So click the button, and then we'll very much appreciate it. All right, let's jump into the comments. Or not the comments, just jump into the questions. Mailbag questions. And I can't remember where I left off. So last week, we recorded the mailbag on Thursday, but then more questions got posted later in the day on Thursday, and I forget exactly where I left off, but I'm going to just start here. This seems like as good a place as any. H2P JC said, you've talked a lot about the line, the linebackers, and the safeties, referring to the defense. What are you hearing about the corners? It sounds like Rylan Gandy's a lock, and I saw Tamon lineman Rashad Battle were mentioned recently. Any word on how Jeremiah Anglin and others are performing so far? Not a ton. To be honest, when it comes down to it, we haven't heard a whole lot about the guys after those three you mentioned. I think Rylan Gandy is locked in as a starter, and it's kind of what we've been saying sort of for the last probably a week or two, really been dating back to the beginning of training camp. We feel like Rylan Gandy's probably locked in as a starter. That other starting spot will probably go to Rashad Battle or Tamon Lynham. Battle, he's a fifth-year senior now. I think he was in the 2020 recruiting class. Might have been 21. Forget which year it was. Either way, he's a senior. He's been around for a while. And then Lynham, of course, the transfer from Nebraska, another veteran guy, although neither one has a ton of playing time, Battle or Lynham, but they've been in college football for a long time. Your starters will be out of that group. It'll be Rylan Gandy and then either Battle or Lynham. That's sort of my assumption. Then I think you'll at least have a three-man rotation with Battle, Gandy, and Lynham, with those three guys. Maybe like what you saw last year, although that was probably more of an even-ish split between Marquez Williams, MJ Devonshire, and AJ Woods than what we'll see with these three guys this year. I think Gandy will get the bulk of the snaps this year, and then it'll be there'll be a rotation. I think there'll be times when Battle and Lynham are on the field together. I don't think Gandy's going to play every snap, but I think he's going to play a lot of them. The real question is whether any of those other guys, like you mentioned, like Jeremiah Anglin, who transferred in from Kentucky, Shadarian Harrison, who's the corner they did get in the 2023 class. They missed on Anglin, but they brought in Harrison. They like Harrison a lot. Or Tamarian Crumpley, who's been around for a while. The question is whether any of those guys will break into the rotation with Gandy, Battle, and Lynham. And I'm not sure. I haven't heard a lot about those guys. I know the coaching staff is really high on Shadarian Harrison. I know they were really excited to add Jeremiah Anglin, but I don't know if either one of those redshirt freshmen are going to break into the rotation this year. I think they'll see some playing time. I think they'll get out there and get on the field, but I'm not sure if they'll be you would actually say they're rotational players that mix in for 200 snaps or something this year or more, 250 snaps or something like that. My guess is they'll be in spot duty. Speaking of spot duty, it was interesting on Wednesday as the ACC network was doing some of its Pitt preview content. Part of it was they showed the Boston College game. And I always, when like a network like the ACC network or one of these networks is going to preview a team, I'm always curious like how they decide which game they're going to air. But it was probably pretty easy for Pitt last year. They only had 3 wins, so you were going to pick one of those. I'm surprised they didn't pick the Louisville game. Maybe that was on CW or something like that. I'm surprised they didn't pick that game, but they went maybe because of Nate Yarnell being the quarterback in the BC game. Maybe that's why they went with that. But anyway, I was watching the end of the Boston College game, and it was a one-score game. I mean, it was 24-16. In the final 2 minutes, Boston College got the ball back. Pitt went with its Delta defensive package, which I think we're going to talk about here with some of these questions coming up. And in that Delta defensive package, they bring in an extra defensive back, and the extra defensive back was Rylan Gandy. They had the 2 corners. They had Marquez Williams and MJ Devonshire, and then they had Gandy out there playing, not A.J. Woods. Now, I don't recall if A.J. Woods was hurt, and maybe something like that came up, but I think it was interesting that in a crucial situation as Pitt's battling for its 3rd win of the season, they went with Rylan Gandy, when they absolutely had to make a defensive stop and not let Boston College get a touchdown. So I think that spoke to Gandy. I think they went into spring camp believing he was probably their best corner. I think he proved himself as such throughout the spring, and then has held on to that position through training camp. And so, like I say, to answer the question, I haven't heard a lot about the guys beyond Gandy, Battle, and Lynham. The biggest question to me, aside from who starts opposite Gandy, is whether or not one of those other guys breaks into the rotation as a 4th corner. PGH Sun J 1325 says, how close are we to the panic button on the defensive ends? I'm starting to really worry about it. I mean, I don't know. Like, part of me thinks, like, if you push, like, are we pushing the panic button now? Well, I would push the panic button on a position during training camp if something happened, if something changed, if a key player got hurt, or there were just some really negative reports coming out. To me, the defensive end situation is basically the same that it's been since Sam Okunlolo transferred, since Deion Hayes transferred, and since they added Chief Borders and added Nate Matlack and David Ojebwe. I mean, the defensive end situation, in my view, has not changed since June 1st or whenever the last personnel move was made, which was, I guess, Chief Borders transferring in from Nebraska. Nothing has really changed about it to me. So, like, I'm not pushing the panic button now, because if there was any point to push the panic button, it was a while ago. Whatever level of panic I had about the defensive ends, I've had for a few months now. It is what it is. And it's remarkable because I feel pretty optimistic about the other 9 spots on defense, but those 2 positions, those 2 defensive end positions, I just don't know. I just don't know what's really going to come out of that group. I think Nate Matlack will be a starter, and I think he'll be fine. Jim and I talked on Wednesday night during the live show about, over under 7.5 sacks, over under 8.5 sacks. Where would you set that number to make it like a challenging over under number? We'll have an over unders episode of the live Panther-Lair show here coming up either next week or the week after. I think Matlack will be fine. I'm guessing Jimmy Scott starts at the other spot. And then your rotation basically is Chief Borders and Sincere Edwards. That's really what it looks like. I don't know if I see David Ojebwe being in the rotation as a top 4 defensive end. And I don't know if I see Maverick Grazio being in the rotation as a top 4 defensive end. And I think the only other guy is true freshman Zach Crothers. And I think Edwards is ahead of Crothers as far as true freshmen go. I think he's ahead of Ojebwe and Grazio, to be honest. And so that's probably your 4-man rotation. Matlack, Scott, Borders, and Edwards. And, like, do I feel an overwhelming sense of optimism about any of those 4 guys individually or the group collectively? Not especially. It's just going to be, it's going to be whatever it is. And I'm not panicking about it now because that's just what that position group is. And so we'll see what they can do. I think there's some talent in the group, but, so, when you say, like, how exactly would you phrase that question? How close are we to the panic button? I mean, you should have already hit it, I guess is what I would say. You should have already hit the panic button when it comes to the defensive ends. Rockhen says, Chris, with the lack of depth at the defensive end position, will we see the Delta package more, and who will be the front three? Any guesses? No, I don't think you'll see the Delta package more for a lot of reasons. One, Pat Narduzzi really likes his base defense to defend against the run, so I don't think you're going to see the Delta out there on obvious run-down situations, first down, second down, unless it's a second and like 25 or something, or like game situation dictates it. I don't think you're going to see, and I think Narduzzi feels like the Delta package, which again, remember, is 3 down linemen, 3 linebackers, and basically 5 defensive backs, although that extra defensive back, sometimes a corner, sometimes a safety, kind of functions as an extra linebacker. It's almost like the personnel of a 3-3-5 playing like a 3-4, kind of. It's not entirely like that. It's far more, I don't want to say complicated, but it's far more elaborate than that. It's not quite as simplistic as I made it sound. But I think Narduzzi believes, and probably rightfully so, that he gives up something against the run. When teams have run against the Delta, I mean, there was a situation last year, I think it was. Can't remember what game it was. Maybe Florida State. Or Wake Forest, maybe. I forget exactly the game. I feel like it was a home game, but I can't remember which one it was. But it was like a 3rd and 10 late in the game. They have the Delta out there. One of the defensive ends jumps off sides. I think it was Nate Temple. Ends up being in a 3rd and 5. They keep the Delta on the field, and I believe whoever the opponent was, they ran the ball and got a first down running the ball on 3rd and 5. And it might have been like 3rd and 9 down to 3rd and 4, but I think it was 3rd and 10 to 3rd and 5, somewhere around there. And so he feels like it's a vulnerability against the run. They're not going to keep it out there all that often unless it's an obvious passing situation. It's 3rd down, 3rd and long, 4th and long, even 2nd and very long is when they'll go to that Delta defensive package. As to which D lineman that I would expect to see, it depends on how like my first guess would be Nate Matlack, Sean Fitzsimmons, and Jimmy Scott would be my first guess. And that's not based on having seen it in practice. They're not rolling out the Delta in practice, at least not the media part of practice. So that's just kind of my guess on who I think they would use there. But I think they'll get Isaiah Neal involved in the middle of the defensive line there in that 3-man front. And then any other D tackles that might emerge. And who knows, if like Sincere Edwards or somebody emerges as a strong play at defensive end, then maybe he could get in there as well. But that would be my guess right now. J-Town Panther fan says, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the offensive players' comfort level with Bell's new offensive scheme at this point in camp? Is one position group further along than another position group on offense? I mean, if there's one position group that's further along, maybe it's the wide receivers because they have a couple guys who are, experienced in it. You know what I mean? So they have a little bit more knowledge and a little bit of more experience playing in the offense. Like scale of 1 to 10, I don't know. There's so many elements. Like, is it as far as like understanding the offense and the plays and the calls and the checks and the adjustments? Is it just adapting to the tempo? Is it? There's so much that goes into it. What is their comfort level? I'm not sure. I couldn't like, yes, I could sit here and say a number. I could be like, oh, it's a 5.5, but I would just be pulling a number out of thin air. I mean, I think it's an ongoing process. And I think we've been reminded of that this week when we talk about how the offense played in the scrimmage on Saturday, that they weren't very clean, that they didn't seem to handle the tempo well, that they had false starts and snap infractions and receivers not getting set. It sounds like it's still very much a work in progress, that when you transition from one offensive style to another, there can be some bumps along the road, particularly when you're going from a slow offense like Frank Cignetti's offense to a fast offense like what Cade Bell wants to run. Procedurally, you're going to run into some issues. Maybe they're a little more comfortable with the plays, what kind of plays they're running, but in terms of the procedure and the operation of the offense, it seems like that transition has been bumpy, which I think you would expect. Smenges says, how likely do you think it is that Pitt is undefeated entering October this season? 50% chance, 25% chance? The schedule in September, the schedule prior to October, they have Kent State at home on August 31st, at Cincinnati on September 7th, West Virginia at home on September 14th. Youngstown State at home on September 21st. Before they start the month of October, they have a week off, and they start the month of October at North Carolina on October 5th. So you're asking, will Pitt go undefeated in its first 4 games? Which is also asking, will Pitt go undefeated against the non-conference portion of the schedule? Kent State, West Virginia, and Youngstown State at home, Cincinnati on the road. A stat we often say, we often bring up, we will always mention, and we don't care that 2020 disproves this because that doesn't count. Pitt has never gone undefeated against a non-conference schedule. Ever since joining a conference, ever since they joined the Big East in the early 1990s, they have never had a perfect non-conference record. Never. 2020 would stand as the exception because they beat Austin Peay, and that was their only non-conference game. But because that was their only non-conference game, and because it was 2020, and because it was a year that all of us would rather forget on so many levels, that doesn't count. So let's adjust our stat. Pitt, since joining a conference in the early 1990s, Pitt has never gone undefeated in non-conference play when playing more than 2 non-conference opponents in a season. How about that? Will they do it this year? Look, I mean, there have been plenty of opportunities for this to happen. You know, like, why didn't it happen in 2021? Because they lost to Western Michigan. You know, why didn't it happen 2008? Only non-conference loss that year was Bowling Green. Right? 2009, their only non-conference that year, they lost to NC State, so at least that's a power conference opponent. What other years did they get close? Not 11, not 12, 13. I forget who they lost to in 2013. I have the media guide right here. It's fantastic. Here, 2013. They lost to Navy. Remember, they lost to Navy in 2013. They beat Notre Dame, but they lost to Navy. 2014, they lost to Iowa and Akron. 2015, Pat Narduzzi lost at Iowa. 2016, they lost to Oklahoma State. Was that the only one, though? It might have been the only non-conference loss that year. We're just talking regular season, of course. 2017, I mean, they had a bunch of them. They had Penn State. They had Oklahoma State. 2018, they lost to UCF and Penn State. 2019, they lost to Penn State. 2020, 2020 was 2020. 2021, they lost to Western Michigan. 2022, they lost to Tennessee. 2023, they lost to everybody, except Wofford. We can go through some of the best teams that Pitt has had. Like, you go back to some of Walt Harris's best teams, right? The 2002 team lost to Texas A&M. The 2003 team lost to to Toledo. You know, the 2004 team lost to Nebraska. So even Walt Harris's best teams weren't able to get over that hump. I mean, so since Pitt joined the Big East, prior to the 1993 season, once they started playing Big East games in 1993, they have never had a season with a perfect non-conference record when they played more than 2 non-conference games. So I can't bet against history that much. You're talking about more than 30 years of history. And the past doesn't necessarily guarantee the future. And maybe you could say, well, on a law of diminishing returns, if you flip a coin 100 times and call heads every time, eventually you're going to get one that turns up heads. And so with 30 plus years of going undefeated in the non-conference, at some point, but maybe that was it. Maybe 2020 was like the football gods saying, okay, here, fine, you can have your undefeated non-conference schedule. You played 1 game. And that's all you get. That's a monkey paw thing right there, right? Please, God, I will give anything for Pitt to have a perfect non-conference record. Okay, here's what you're going to get. You'll get your perfect non-conference record with a global pandemic that kills hundreds of thousands of people and causes college football and all sports to be thrown into complete upheaval, and you only play 1 non-conference game because your whole schedule will be screwed up. There's your perfect non-conference record. So I guess, Smenges, I would say this. Can Pitt beat Youngstown State, Cincinnati, West Virginia, and Kent State? Yes, they can. Is it totally conceivable they could pull it off this year despite playing 2 power conference opponents? Yes. Do you want to run the risk of another global pandemic? I don't. So I'm going to say 0% chance. Because I just don't want to bring down that darkness once again. That was a hard year. That was a hard year for everybody. Just ask Jeff Capel. He'll tell you how hard it was. I can't believe it. We're not even that just wraps up the questions from last week. Holy cow. And we're already here. We're almost at the 20-minute. All right, we'll take one question from this week, and the rest of these questions we'll answer next week because these are good questions here as well. And some of them I actually want to wait another week to answer. But Kilbossier Dennis, you had the first question that got in. You posted 24 minutes after I put up the thread asking for questions, so this is good. It says, with the sudden surge of Eli Holstein over the past few weeks, can you shed any more light on which aspects of his camp performance have contributed the most? Do they like his mobility more to add an aspect to the running game? Is he taking more shots and producing more splash plays while maybe Nate Yarnell is just taking underneath stuff the defense is giving him? Less turnovers than Nate. Thanks. I don't have that many specifics. Now, this is a story that if you've been on Panther-Lair.com, it's something you've been following all week. The fact that this quarterback competition is really a quarterback competition and one that is getting very, very interesting. One that is, moving more and more toward being up in the air. Whereas we thought Nate Yarnell was probably going to be the guy no matter what they said about the quarterback competition. And to the point where now we're saying it really could be a total toss-up between Nate Yarnell and Eli Holstein. I asked Pat Narduzzi yesterday, because we talked to him a lot about the quarterback situation. He said, those guys are competing and all this stuff. I also think, as an aside, I think Sunday's scrimmage is going to go a long way in determining who the starter will be. But I asked Pat Narduzzi yesterday about, what's the upside in Eli? What does what does Eli Holstein do well? What really stands out to you about him? And he said one of the biggest things was his mobility, his ability to run, to make plays in the pocket is one of the biggest things that stands out. So there's a part of me that thinks, and I've said this a couple of times, and I'll probably start repeating this a lot because sometimes I get hooked on thoughts or concepts or topics or themes, and I just keep saying them over and over again. But there's a part of me that thinks, the baseline for both of these guys is protect the football and get it to the receivers when they're open. And if one of them can't do that, or one of them is markedly better at doing that than the other, then the one who's better will get the job. But if they both achieve that baseline, that they can protect the ball, they don't have too many turnovers, they're getting the ball to the receivers when they're open, then I think what the coaches will be looking for is upside. They'll be looking for that guy who can achieve the baseline, but then elevate the team, elevate the offense, carry the team, and really kind of push the ball to lead to victory, to be more explosive, to really let the offense flourish. I think that's what they're going to look for. And I think that might be what Eli Holstein is able to provide, either with his running ability and athleticism or with his arm strength or just how he plays the position. I think we know, and I'm fairly confident Nate Yarnell can achieve that baseline, protecting the football and taking what the defense gives you. Although Narduzzi said that in Saturday's scrimmage, that was one problem for both quarterbacks, is that they didn't do a good enough job just taking what the defense gave them. I think Nate Yarnell can achieve that baseline. But the question, and we haven't really seen it out of him in his limited playing time, is 75, 76 pass attempts, however many it's been. The question is, can he take that next step? Can he be at that next level to really carry the offense, to be aggressive, to be a playmaker? And if Eli Holstein can equally achieve that baseline and then show that he's got that extra something, then he'll get the job. And I think the coaches are seeing signs of that. I think they're seeing signs of Eli Holstein maybe being able to do it. But like I say, this scrimmage on Sunday, I think, is going to go a long way. And so whoever comes out there, protects the ball, takes advantage of what the defense gives them, and then takes some shots, I think is going to be the guy who ends up winning the starting job. And I think it's very much up in the air right now. It should be real interesting to follow and see what we can get out of this scrimmage on Sunday. But we'll see what happens. All right, thanks for all the great questions. Everybody who asked a question that we didn't get to this week, we will get to it next week. You've got a few questions in there that I think will be really good to answer on next week's mailbag, which will be the end of training camp mailbag. So those questions will be really good for that. And then, of course, you can add more questions throughout the week, and we will get as many as we can into the Friday mailbag on next Friday's Morning Pit. So thanks for all the questions. Thanks for watching the video today. Thanks for watching all the videos all week. We really appreciate it. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, to never miss any of our Pitt video content, and get all the Pitt coverage you can handle at Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. Thanks so much for tuning in today. Thanks for tuning in all week. I hope you've had a great week, and I hope you have a great weekend. We'll catch up with you on Monday morning for the Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.